The American Old West wasn't just a land of gunslingers, outlaws, and dusty showdowns at high noon. Beneath the legends we think we know lies a stranger, darker, and often far more surprising reality. One filled with unexplained disappearances, bizarre characters, twisted coincidences, and stories so unusual they sound like pure fiction. These are the tales that didn't always make it into dime novels or Hollywood scripts, yet they were very real to the people who lived through them. In this video, we're uncovering 7 strange tales from the American Old West that reveal just how mysterious and unsettling the frontier could truly be. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a comment below and tell us which tale surprised you the most, or share another strange Old West story you've heard. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories, forgotten history, and shocking facts from the American Old West. The American Wild West has long lived in popular memory as a land of larger-than-life legends. Images of daring outlaws, long cattle drives across open plains, and frenzied gold and silver rushes dominate the traditional narrative. These familiar scenes have been repeated for generations in books, films, and folklore, shaping how the era is commonly understood. Less expected, however, are the stranger stories that also emerge from the frontier. Tales involving unexplained sightings, unusual animals, and odd local legends rarely appear in classic Western imagery, yet they were very much part of how people in the 19th century made sense of an unfamiliar and rapidly changing world. Frontier communities often relied on rumor, newspaper exaggeration, and oral storytelling, which helped these unusual accounts spread. Elmer McCurdy's afterlife was stranger than his life as an outlaw. Elmer McCurdy is far from a familiar name in popular Old West history. Unlike legendary figures such as Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, Jesse James and Frank James, or Billy the Kid, McCurdy's criminal career attracted little attention during his lifetime. His activities were limited in scope, poorly executed, and largely overshadowed by more famous contemporaries. Although McCurdy lived at the very end of the frontier era, his story failed to enter folklore in the way many others did. He reportedly expressed a desire never to surrender, but his life ended quietly and without the notoriety that typically defines so-called last outlaws of the Wild West. For decades afterward, his name faded almost completely from public memory. Ironically, McCurdy's fame arrived more than 60 years later. In 1976, as the last first-hand memories of the frontier were disappearing, a television production crew for the $6 Million Man rented an old amusement park funhouse as a filming location. During setup, a prop thought to be a mannequin was moved and part of it detached, revealing that it was not artificial at all, but a preserved human body. Subsequent examination confirmed the remains were McCurdy's. Historical records explain how this happened. After his death, a man falsely claiming to be a relative retrieved the body from a funeral home. In reality, he was a carnival operator. In the early 20th century, traveling shows frequently displayed outlaw remains as attractions, capitalizing on lingering public fascination with the Old West. Over the decades, McCurdy's body passed through a series of unusual roles, used as collateral for unpaid debts, exhibited in sideshows, stored in a wax museum, and eventually forgotten in an amusement park funhouse. These practices, while disturbing by modern standards, were not uncommon at a time when regulations surrounding human remains were minimal. Finally, in 1977, McCurdy was given a proper burial in Boot Hill Cemetery in Guthrie, Oklahoma, 66 years after his death. Had it not been for an accidental discovery by a television crew, his remains might have continued drifting anonymously through popular culture, a strange footnote to the long afterlife of the American frontier. 2 tombstone cowboys shared one heck of a hunting story. Across the western United States, traces of deep prehistoric time are not difficult to find. Fossils have surfaced in many places, from marine reptiles discovered in Nevada to massive dinosaur remains unearthed in Colorado. These finds remind us that long before the frontier era, the region was home to creatures that feel almost mythical today. By the late 19th century, however, such animals were understood to exist only in stone. That is why a strange account published in the Tombstone Epitaph in April 1890 captured so much attention. According to the article, Two ranchers traveling between the Whetstone Mountains and the Huachuca Mountains claimed to have encountered an enormous winged creature in the desert near Tombstone. The newspaper described the animal as resembling a gigantic reptile with wings, an unusually long tail, and a massive head. Its reported dimensions were extraordinary, far larger than any known animal, living or extinct. The article compared its appearance to what we now associate with prehistoric flying reptiles, and even mentioned a photograph said to document the discovery. From a historical perspective, the story does not hold up under scrutiny. No photograph accompanied the original 1890 article, and the first references to such an image do not appear until 1963, more than 70 years later. Additionally, no rival newspapers in Tombstone or elsewhere repeated the account, which would have been highly unusual if the incident had been taken seriously at the time. This context matters. The 1890s marked the height of so-called yellow journalism in the United States, when sensational and exaggerated stories were commonly used to boost circulation. The American Southwest, with its vast landscapes and limited scientific oversight, provided fertile ground for dramatic frontier tales. Seen in that light, the alleged creature fits neatly into a broader tradition of regional folklore. Stories of thunderbirds, winged serpents, and other mysterious flying beings appear throughout indigenous myths and later settler legends of the Southwest. While the Tombstone account is almost certainly a fabrication, it remains a compelling example of how frontier storytelling blended curiosity, exaggeration, and local mythology into narratives that still intrigue readers today. The West is chock full of missing mines. The mineral wealth of the American West helps explain why stories of missing treasure are so deeply woven into frontier lore. During the 19th century, vast deposits of gold, silver, and copper drew prospectors across the western half of the United States. Alongside real discoveries, rumors of hidden or abandoned riches spread just as quickly, giving rise to dozens of legendary treasure sites. Among the best known are tales such as the San Saba gold mine, the Wheelbarrow mine, and many others that were never formally named. Lists of these supposed locations circulated widely, especially in regions associated with the Old West, where incomplete records and isolated terrain made verification difficult. Some legends were based on misunderstood claims, while others likely grew from outright speculation. The most famous of all these stories centers on the Lost Dutchman mine. According to tradition, a German-born prospector named Jacob Waltz traveled extensively in search of gold before discovering a rich deposit somewhere in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. He reportedly hinted to acquaintances that the mine was extraordinarily productive, but passed away before revealing its exact location. Over time, the Lost Dutchman mine evolved from a personal story into a full-blown legend. Generations of treasure hunters have devoted vacations to searching for it, and for years, maps claiming to reveal the mine's location sold briskly. Numerous claims of discovery have surfaced, yet none have ever been confirmed. Small towns in California and Texas reported close encounters 50 years before Roswell. When people are asked about the first major modern UFO incident in the United States, many immediately think of Roswell. In July 1947, the U.S. Army Air Forces released a statement claiming that personnel had recovered a mysterious flying disc. That explanation was later revised, first to a weather balloon and later to a Cold War-era surveillance project. By then, however, the idea of flying saucers and official secrecy had firmly taken root in American popular culture. Yet Roswell was far from the earliest reported encounter with unidentified objects in the sky. Decades earlier, during the height of the frontier era, similar stories were already circulating. In fact, elements of what we now associate with modern UFO lore can be traced back to Wild West newspapers and local legends. One such account dates to 1896 and comes from Lodi. That year, Colonel H.G. Shaw and Camille Spooner claimed to have encountered three unusual beings while traveling to the Fresno Citrus Fair. According to Shaw's written account, published in the Evening Mail, the figures were tall, thin, and unlike anyone they had ever seen. Shaw speculated, very much in the language of late 19th century science fiction, that the visitors might have come from Mars. From a historical perspective, This story fits neatly into its era. The 1890s were a time of widespread fascination with astronomy, fueled by popular writings about canals on Mars and the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Newspapers frequently blended speculation, imagination, and fact, especially when reporting unusual events. Reports continued into the following year. In 1897, residents across Texas described seeing cigar-shaped airships in the sky, objects that closely resembled Shaw's earlier description. One of the most enduring stories emerged near Aurora, where locals later claimed that one such craft came down nearby. Decades afterward, accounts suggested that townspeople examined the site and treated what they believed to be the pilot's remains with respect. In 1973, longtime Aurora resident Mary Evans recalled the incident for a reporter. She described widespread excitement and unease, noting that the sight was especially startling at a time when powered aircraft were still rare. Other later interviews referenced unusual metal fragments found in the area, though no definitive evidence has ever surfaced. Historically, none of these stories have been verified, and no physical proof has confirmed the presence of extraterrestrial visitors. Researchers and enthusiasts have searched for supposed burial sites and artifacts for decades without success. What these tales most clearly reveal is not alien contact, but the imaginative spirit of the frontier era, when rapid technological change, expanding scientific ideas, and a sense of boundless possibility encouraged people to look not only across the land, but upward into the sky for answers. Some believe red-haired, cannibal giants once roamed Nevada. In the oral traditions of the Northern Paiute, there exists a story about a hostile group said to have lived in what is now Nevada long before European settlement. These figures are often described as having red hair and engaging in taboo practices, and the tale has been passed down as part of Paiute cultural memory. The best-known written version of this tradition appears in an 1883 book by Sarah Winnemucca titled Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. In it, Winnemucca recounts a story told among her people about a small, aggressive group that once lived near the Humboldt River. According to the narrative, this group posed a long-term threat to Paiute communities and was eventually confronted after years of conflict. Winnemucca's account reads much like a traditional folk story, shaped by symbolism, moral lessons, and cultural memory rather than by modern historical documentation. Importantly, her description does not portray these figures as giants, nor does it dwell on physical exaggeration. The focus of the story is on danger, survival, and the eventual restoration of safety for her people. As non-native settlers moved into Nevada in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the story began to change. New details were gradually added, often reflecting sensational interests rather than indigenous tradition. One major shift occurred after 1911, when guano miners excavated a cave near Lovelock Cave and uncovered human remains and artifacts. Many of these items were later lost or poorly documented, leaving room for speculation. This lack of clear evidence helped fuel exaggerated claims, including the idea that unusually large skeletons, sometimes described as giants, had been discovered. No verified remains supporting those claims have ever surfaced. Nevertheless, the story spread widely, bolstered by repetition in popular media. Even reputable outlets such as the Los Angeles Times have at times repeated elements of the legend without critical examination. The body curse has tourists trembling after they take home artifacts. Collecting souvenirs has long been part of the travel experience. Most destinations cater to this tradition with postcards, shirts, and small keepsakes meant to help visitors remember where they have been or share the experience with others. Yet some travelers seek something more authentic than gift shop items. And that impulse has often led to problems at historic and protected sites. For decades, visitors have removed objects from public lands across the American West. Places such as Petrified Forest National Park have struggled with the steady loss of natural and historical material. Even in recent years, high-profile thefts have occurred at sites like Joshua Tree National Park and the Ahwahnee in Yosemite National Park. One of the most unusual examples comes from Bodie State Historic Park, the preserved remains of a once booming mining town near the California-Nevada border. Founded in 1877 during a gold rush, Body declined after mining activity slowed and was largely abandoned by the 1940s. In 1962, California designated the site as a state historic park and adopted a policy of arrested decay, preserving the town exactly as it was left. Despite protections, items have been taken from Bodie almost since it became a park. What sets Bodie apart, however, is that many of those objects eventually find their way back. Park staff regularly receive mailed artifacts accompanied by letters from former visitors who admit to taking items and later experiencing a run of misfortune. According to these accounts, people often connect everyday hardships, such as mechanical trouble, job difficulties, or persistent health issues, to what has become known as the body curse. These letters were later compiled in the book Bad Luck, Hot Rocks, which documents how strongly some visitors believed the curse affected their lives. Rangers have reported that some individuals travel great distances to return items to the precise spot from which they were taken. In one case, a visitor reportedly returned a nail after it punctured a tire while driving through town. From a historical and psychological perspective, these stories likely reflect guilt, coincidence, and the human tendency to find meaning in misfortune rather than any supernatural force. Body's reputation is further enhanced by classic ghost town folklore. Visitors have claimed to see unexplained lights or hear faint music, while park employees often describe the site as having a distinct atmosphere. One ranger noted that he never witnessed anything unusual himself, though he admitted the buildings can evoke an unsettling feeling. There is no evidence that Bodie is haunted or cursed in any literal sense. Still, the legend serves a practical purpose. It reinforces an important lesson shared by historians and park officials alike. Historical sites are best preserved when visitors leave them exactly as they are, taking only photographs and leaving the past untouched. The Red Ghost terrorized ranchers of the Southwest. Had circumstances unfolded differently in the mid-19th century, the American West might have looked very different. Instead of cowboys, travelers across the frontier could have encountered camel handlers guiding caravans through the desert. This unlikely scenario emerged from practical concerns rather than fantasy. The idea gained traction after Edward Fitzgerald Beale, a veteran of frontier service, observed how poorly horses and mules performed in the arid landscapes of the Southwest. Drawing on knowledge of Middle Eastern and North African deserts, Beale proposed that camels, animals adapted to heat, sparse water, and heavy loads, would be better suited for the region. In 1855, the plan received official support from Jefferson Davis, who authorized the importation of camels for military use. By 1857, the U.S. Army had brought in roughly 75 camels, creating what became informally known as the U.S. Army Camel Corps. One group was stationed in Texas, while another traveled west toward California under Beale's leadership. Despite early success, the project faced growing resistance. Funding became uncertain as the Civil War approached, and mule breeders lobbied strongly against the program. When the war began, the Texas camels fell into Confederate hands and were later released or dispersed, while the California herd was eventually sold off. Ironically, later experience confirmed that Beale and Davis had been correct. Camels proved exceptionally capable in desert conditions, often outperforming traditional pack animals. As some escaped or were abandoned, small numbers wandered through parts of Arizona and New Mexico well into the late 19th century. Because many settlers and ranchers had never seen camels before, sightings of these unfamiliar animals fueled rumors and frontier legends. One of the most famous was the Red Ghost, described